My bank account has kept my parents' porch light on for 36 straight months, and tonight, of all nights, they're clinking champagne glasses downtown without me. I'm Maya Brooks, 31, a civil engineer in Pittsburgh. I don't live in my parents' house, but I've been paying for it like I do. Mortgage, property taxes, the little emergency repairs that always seem to happen right before something important. This week was supposed to be important, their 35th anniversary. My mother called last Monday with that sugar-sweet voice she saves for bad news. "Sweetheart, the restaurant is tiny," she said. "We had to keep it intimate." I told myself I didn't care. I told myself I had deadlines, that grown daughters missed dinners, that it was fine. Then Saturday night, my phone handed me the truth like a slap. My sister Lila had posted a photo under warm golden lights, one of those rooftop places with white tablecloths and glassware that looks expensive, even empty. Everyone was there. My parents in the center, Lila leaning in like the hero of the story, a cousin I haven't seen in years, even our neighbor Mr. Klein, who once forgot my name at the mailbox. The caption read, "Family only, finally all together, finally all together." My thumb hovered over the screen while something cold moved through my chest, slow and steady, like a door locking from the inside. For a second, I tried to invent excuses. Maybe they assumed I couldn't come. Maybe it was a mistake. Then I saw my mother's comment beneath it. "Couldn't be prouder." Prouder of what? A table I wasn't allowed to sit at? I opened the comment box and typed one sentence, the kind you can't untype once it's true. "Happy anniversary. Starting tomorrow, the house payments are on you." I hit post before my guilt could tackle my finger. 5 minutes later, the photo was gone. 10 minutes after that, my phone started to vibrate like it was possessed. Missed calls stacking up so fast the screen couldn't keep up. Mom, Dad, Lila, Mom again, Dad again, Lila again. I didn't answer. I sat in my apartment with the glow of my phone painting the walls, realizing something I should have admitted years ago. They didn't run out of seats. They made sure I didn't have one, and I still had no idea what they'd already used my name for behind my back to keep their perfect little life standing. A week before the anniversary dinner, my mom called with that sugary voice she used when she needed me to swallow something sharp. "Sweetheart, we're finalizing the seating," she said. "It's a tiny private room, just family. You understand, right?" Her words didn't hurt right away. They just sat there, heavy, waiting for meaning to catch up. "Of course," I said. "Have fun." She sounded relieved, not guilty, relieved. An hour later, my sister Lila texted, "Don't take it personally." That smiley face did more damage than any insult. Lila had always been an expert at sounding kind while standing on your throat. I typed 3 replies and deleted them all. At work the next day, Naya from accounting caught me staring at my phone like it was a bomb. She slid a coffee onto my desk and said, "You look like you're paying for someone else's happiness again." I told her the truth, how I'd been covering my parents' mortgage since the pandemic, how every "how are you" turned into "could you help?" How my name only mattered when a bill was due. Nia listened, stirring her drink slow. Then she said it, quiet as a verdict. They love the version of you that pays, not the version of you that needs. My throat tightened because I'd been building my whole life around proving my worth, and she'd just explained why it never worked. That night, I did what I always did when I felt rejected. I tried harder. I ordered a simple silver photo frame online and paid extra for engraving. 30 years strong. I wrote a short card. Congratulations. Wishing you many more. 3 days later, a box showed up on my doorstep. Mom's handwriting on the return label. Inside was the frame, untouched, and a note. We already have too much. I stood in my hallway holding it like a confession. Too much of what? Memories? Proof I existed? Lila called that evening, bright and breathy. Mom didn't mean it like that. You're just sensitive. Sensitive. The family's favorite word for stop noticing. After I hung up, I opened my banking app and stared at the scheduled transfer I'd set years ago. Automatic, obedient, invisible. My thumb hovered over the cancel button. For 3 years, I'd been their safety net. And I realized the only way to learn what they truly thought of me was to let them feel 1 month without me. I told myself I wouldn't look at social media. I folded laundry, rinsed dishes, kept a show running. Anything to avoid thinking about my parents in a restaurant, celebrating a family-only anniversary without me. Then my phone buzzed anyway. Lila's post sat at the top of my feed. The photo loaded and my stomach dropped. Candlelight, white tablecloths, champagne glasses raised. My parents in the center, smiling like they were posing for a holiday card. Lila leaned in close, hand on my mother's shoulder, and around them, so many limited seats. Cousins, old family friends, even our neighbor, Mrs. Klein. The caption read, "Family only, finally, all together." I stared at those 4 words until they stopped being English and became a verdict. Maybe it was a mistake, I thought, just long enough to be embarrassed by the hope. Then I scrolled down and saw my mother's comment. Couldn't be prouder. Dozens of hearts followed, people praising our beautiful family. I didn't cry. I felt cleared out, like something in me finally snapped into place. Anger stopped feeling like fire and started feeling like math. I opened the comment box and typed 1 sentence, the truth I'd been financing for years. Happy anniversary. Starting tomorrow, the house payments are on you. I hit post. For a moment, the world went still. My words sat beneath their perfect photo like a crack in glass. I set my phone down and walked to the kitchen, waiting for guilt to tackle me. It didn't. 5 minutes later, the post disappeared. 10 minutes after that, my screen turned into a strobe of missed calls. Mom, Dad, Lila, Mom again. The vibrations rattled my table like a warning. Then the texts came, stacked tight and breathless. Maya, answer. What is wrong with you? You embarrassed us. Call me now. I didn't touch the phone. I watched the messages pile up until my father's name appeared. He'd always been the quiet one, the peacekeeper. Please, don't do this. Don't do what? Stop paying. Stop pretending I mattered. Then my mother's message arrived, and it hit like a slap. After everything we've done for you, you're being selfish. Selfish. I let out a short, ugly laugh. The word felt stolen, like they'd taken my sacrifices and used them against me. Another call lit up the screen. I flipped the phone face down. The apartment went quiet again, but it wasn't lonely. It was space. Space I'd never been allowed to take. And in that silence, one thought kept repeating, colder than the snow outside. If they could erase me from their table this easily, what else had they been willing to do in my name? But the truth is, my place in my family was decided a long time ago. When Lila was 8, she brought home a crayon drawing for Mother's Day. Stick figures with crooked smiles. Mom framed it like it belonged in a gallery and made everyone admire it for weeks. When I was 10, I won a science fair ribbon so bright it looked electric blue. I carried it home like a trophy, heart-pounding, waiting for that same pride. Mom glanced at it, nodded once, and slid it into a kitchen drawer. "Don't brag," she said, like success was something rude. That was the pattern. Lila was celebrated for trying. I was tolerated for succeeding. By high school, the roles hardened into something everyone pretended not to notice. If Lila cried, the entire house stopped spinning to comfort her. If I cried, I was told to be strong in the same tone you use for someone you don't have time for. And then adulthood hit, and my usefulness got a price tag. When the family car died, Dad called me from the driveway, voice careful. "We're in a little bind," he said. I wired the money from my first real paycheck before I'd even bought myself a decent winter coat. When Dad's medical bills stacked up, my phone lit up again, not with "How are you?" but with numbers. I sent checks, pretended the silence afterward didn't bruise. Every crisis turned me into a transaction. Meanwhile, Lila's life kept exploding in dramatic bursts. Bad choices, broken relationships, dramatic exits and returns. Mom treated each one like a heroic battle. "She's doing her best," she'd say to anyone who'd listen, as if best was something reserved for one daughter only. Dad just stayed quiet. He wasn't cruel. He was worse. Passive. When Mom criticized me, he'd murmur, "You know how your mother is." Like that explained away years of neglect. I once asked him, straight out, why he never defended me. He stared at his plate and said, "Keeping peace is easier than being right." That sentence replayed in my head while my phone buzzed on my table, call after call after call. I opened my photo gallery without meaning to. Every family picture looked the same. Lila pressed to Mom's side, Dad standing steady behind them, me just off to the edge, half-cropped, like an afterthought. My chest tightened. Then a new notification slid across my screen. An email I hadn't noticed before. Important. Mortgage account update. Please review. And suddenly, the exclusion didn't feel like hurt. It felt like a setup. At first, nothing happened. No surprise visit, no apology, just quiet. So heavy, it made me wonder if I'd imagined the whole fight. Then, on a Tuesday morning, my mother texted like she'd misplaced her keys. "The bank keeps calling. They say the payment didn't go through. Is everything okay?" I stared at the screen, waiting for the words "I'm sorry" to appear. They never did. A few hours later came the follow-up. Same sweetness, sharper edge. "We didn't want to bother you, but they said it's urgent." Urgent, her favorite word. Not because she cared about a deadline, because she cared about my guilt. I didn't answer. By Friday, Lila turned it into a performance. She posted a photo holding Mom's hand. Soft lighting, sad eyes, a caption vague enough to make strangers pick sides. Some people forget who raised them. Comments poured in right on cue. "Stay strong. Family hurts the most." Lila replied with crying emojis like she was the brave one. I closed the app before my anger could type anything. 3 days later, an envelope arrived in my mailbox. Thick paper, official seal, my name on the front like it belonged there. I laughed once, short and confused, because I hadn't lived in my parents' house in years. I was just the one who paid for it. I tore it open, scanned the first page, and the air left my lungs. Maya Brooks, borrower/guarantor, not authorized payer, not supporting family, borrower. And the letter wasn't even about a missed payment. It was about a refinance, new numbers, bigger balance, a longer term, riskier rate, and the date said it had been processed 2 months ago, quietly, while my transfers were still flowing like normal. I read every line 3 times, hunting for a typo. There wasn't one. Every signature box had my name. Every identifier matched me. The next morning, I called the bank and got bounced through departments until a calm man finally said, "This is the servicing desk. My name is Ethan." I asked him to verify the refinance. He hesitated, like he could hear my heartbeat through the phone. "Yes," he said carefully. "The refinance was completed in July. Your parents are listed as primary borrowers. Your signature authorized the guarantee." "I never signed anything," I said. A pause, a keyboard, clicking. "We have electronic copies on file," Ethan replied, "and the signature matches prior authorizations. It appears consistent." Consistent? That single word turned my stomach because it meant someone hadn't just asked for help. They'd used me. In one, my mother kept texting like I'd misplaced her favorite sweater. "Honey, we need to talk." Then, "You're being unreasonable." And finally, "You're tearing this family apart." In the other, my laptop screen was open, and I was hunting for proof. I searched my inbox for mortgage and account update and refinance, half expecting nothing. Then I found it, an automated email from the bank dated 2 months earlier, subject line bland enough to ignore, refinance confirmation. I remembered seeing it and swiping it away, assuming it was spam. My hands went cold as I opened the attachment. The PDF wasn't a notice. It was a story, my story, written in numbers and checkboxes. My name sat at the top, my email, my phone, and there, in the signature field, a digital scribble stamped verified, except I'd never verified anything. I scrolled down to the authentication section and felt my stomach twist. The signing method wasn't in person. It wasn't notarized. It was account-based, approval through credentials tied to the old joint transfer account I'd once shared with Dad to make payments easier. I had left that access open because I trusted them. That trust had become their key. I printed the documents. Then I printed the email header. Then every page of the refinance packet. I spread them across my kitchen table like evidence at a crime scene, highlighting dates, lender IDs, the sequence of approvals. 2 verification steps, both cleared within 10 minutes of each other. Not an accident, not confusion, a plan. My chest rose and fell slowly as something inside me shifted from hurt to precision. I wasn't crying now. I wasn't even shaking. I was counting. I opened a new email and typed the recipient, Ethan Davis. Subject line, formal dispute of fraudulent authorization. I wrote like an engineer, not a daughter. Timeline, attached documents, statement of non-consent, request to freeze the account and flag the refinance for fraud review. I asked for timestamps, IP logs, and the exact method of verification used. When I hit send, the apartment went quiet again. But this time, the silence didn't feel like rejection. It felt like control. My phone lit up once more, this time with a single text from Lila. "Mom wants brunch, just us. It's time to talk." I stared at the message, then at the folder of papers on my table. They wanted a conversation. I was bringing evidence. Before I walked into brunch with my family, I signed a retainer agreement that could put my mother on the wrong side of a courtroom. Clark Benson's office smelled like old paper and fresh coffee, like a place where feelings didn't matter unless they came with receipts. I slid my folder across his desk. He didn't react the way I expected. No pity, no shock, just focus. He flipped through the refinance packet, stopped at the signature page, and tapped it once with his pen. "This isn't a misunderstanding," he said. "This is forgery." The word landed heavy, but it also felt clean, like someone finally naming the monster in the room. Clark laid out my choices in plain language. Freeze the account. File a fraud report. Request the authentication logs. And stop communicating with my parents in ways they could twist later. If you meet them, he added, do it in public. Say as little as possible. Let them talk. On my way home, Ethan from the bank emailed me the audit trail. Time-stamped verification steps, device info, a sign-in location that matched my parents' neighborhood. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. So it wasn't confusion. It wasn't paperwork gone wrong. Someone sat in that house, opened a laptop, and signed my name like it belonged to them. That night, I changed every password I could think of. I removed my old joint payment access. I printed the audit trail and the refinance packet, then slipped everything into a slim binder with clean tabs, date, signature, logs, emails, like I was prepping for a trial, not brunch. Lila texted again, Sunday, 11 o'clock, Maple and Vine Cafe. I replied with one word, okay. Sunday morning, I arrived early and chose a table by the window. My binder sat beside my coffee like a quiet threat. My hands were steady, but my stomach wasn't. I kept hearing my mother's voice in my head, selfish, ungrateful, dramatic, like she could still rearrange reality if she said it confidently enough. They walked in together, Mom in pearls, Lila in a cream coat, both smiling too bright. Dad followed a step behind, shoulders slumped, eyes on the floor. "Maya," Mom said, like we were meeting for shopping. "Thank God we can fix this." Lila slid into the seat across from me. "Let's be adults," she said. "You made a scene online. You hurt Mom." I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just opened my binder and slid one page across the table. "Explain this signature," I said. Mom's smile tightened. "I don't know what that is." I slid the next page, the audit trail. Lila's eyes flicked over it, and for the first time her expression cracked. Dad finally looked up, right at me, and whispered, all almost too low to hear, "Maya, there's something else you need to know." And then he pulled a second envelope from his jacket. My name was printed on the front. The envelope Dad slid across the table wasn't thick like my binder. It was thin, plain, the kind of mail you don't notice until it destroys your week. My name was typed in the center, Maya Brooks, with my parents' address beneath it like I still lived in that house. Mom's hand shot out. "Robert, don't." Dad flinched but didn't pull it back. For the first time in my life, he met my eyes and didn't look away. "I should have given it to you the day it came," he said. His voice was hoarse. "But your mother, she said it would only upset you." Lila's smile had vanished. She stared at the envelope like she already knew what was inside. I didn't ask permission. I broke the seal. Inside was a single page with bold letters across the top. Notice of default. Home equity account. My vision narrowed. I read the line that mattered most twice because my brain refused to accept it. Borrower, Maya Brooks, a past due amount, a deadline, a sentence about acceleration and legal remedies if the account wasn't cured. My heartbeat thudded against my ribs like a warning siren. "This isn't the refinance," I said slowly. "This is a second loan." Mom's chin lifted. "Don't be dramatic." I held the paper up. My name is on it, again. Lila's fingers twisted the napkin into a rope. It's not like they'd approve it without you, she muttered. That was the moment the room tilted. Without me? I whispered. So you knew. Mom leaned forward, voice dropping into that familiar tone. Soft, controlling, practiced. Maya, listen. The bank calls it a line of credit. It's temporary. We were going to pay it back the second things stabilized. Things, I repeated. What things? No one answered fast enough. Dad did, finally, quietly, like confessing in church. Your sister had debt, more than we thought. Your mother panicked. Lila's face flushed. I didn't ask for this, she snapped, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine. I felt something go cold and clean inside me. Not anger anymore. Clarity. You used my identity to save the family image, I said. Twice. Mom's eyes narrowed. We raised you. We sacrificed. Stop, I cut in. My voice was steady enough to scare me. This is fraud. Mom's mouth tightened into a line. If you report this, you'll ruin us. You'll ruin your father and your sister. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I folded the notice. Oz placed it back in the envelope and slid it into my bag, like evidence. Then I pulled out my phone, opened my contacts, and tapped Clark Benson. Dad's hand hovered over the table like he wanted to stop me, but he didn't. And that silence, his silence, told me I was finally doing what he never could. Ethan here, the bank manager said. His voice was low, careful, the way people sound when they're carrying bad news they didn't cause. I received your dispute. We've placed a temporary freeze on the refinance review, but there's something else. My grip tightened on the phone. What else? A pause, keys clicking. A home equity line. It's active, and there was a recent draw. I stared at the wall like it might explain what my own family wouldn't. How recent? 48 hours, he said. And the funds were moved out in 2 transfers. 2 transfers. Like someone knew exactly how much they could take without triggering alarms. I hung up and called Clark Benson. He didn't sugarcoat anything. You're going to treat this like identity theft, he said. Affidavit, police report, credit freeze, tonight. No more conversations with your mother that aren't documented. The word police made my stomach flip, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. That's the ugly magic of family betrayal. It makes innocents feel guilty. While Clark emailed forms, I pulled my free credit report. My hand shook as the page loaded. There were inquiries I didn't recognize. A store card opened in my name. A pre-approved offer, accepted 3 months ago, right around the time the refinance went through. I felt cold all over. They hadn't just borrowed my name, they'd tried to become me. My phone lit up again, this time with a voicemail from my mom. I let it play. Maya, her voice purred, then sharpened. This is getting out of hand. If you keep doing this, people will find out how unstable you've been. Do you want that? Do you want everyone thinking you're unwell? Unwell. Not wrong, not cruel, not illegal. Unwell. A threat dressed like concern. Then Lila posted, not a photo this time. Text on a plain background, easy to share. Some people will destroy their own family over money. Pray for us. The comments rolled in like a wave, ungrateful, heartless. Hope she gets what she deserves. I closed the app before it could make me doubt reality. At 9:40 p.m., as I was printing my affidavit, someone knocked on my apartment door. 3 sharp taps that didn't sound like a neighbor. When I opened it, 2 uniformed officers stood in the hallway. "Ma'am," the older one said, neutral but firm, "are you Maya Brooks? We need to speak with you about a report filed by your mother." My heart dropped. "What report?" I asked. He glanced at his notepad. "She's accusing you of fraud." The older officer kept his tone neutral, but his eyes stayed on my face like he was measuring whether I was about to bolt. "She's accusing you of fraud," he repeated. "Says you forged documents connected to a property loan and threatened to ruin them if they didn't comply." For a split second, my stomach dropped so hard I almost laughed. Of course she did. My mother couldn't argue with paperwork, so she tried to replace the story. "Bah, I'm not opening the door wider," I said calmly, keeping my voice even. "But I will cooperate. What exactly did she claim I did?" The younger officer glanced at his partner, then said, "She claims you took out a refinance in your parents' names, that you're trying to force them out." I exhaled slowly. That's backwards. I stepped back just enough to grab the binder from my kitchen table. My hands didn't shake this time. The fear had already burned out. What was left felt clinical. "I'm going to show you evidence," I said. "Then I'm going to file my own report." I opened the binder to the tab marked Logs and held it where they could see without crossing my threshold. Bank statements, the refinance packet, the audit trail with timestamps and device sign-in location. "This is the refinance," I said. "I did not authorize it. Here are the verification timestamps. Here is the bank's confirmation that the signature was submitted through credentials I used to share with my father for payments. Here is the notice of default on a second account opened in my name." The older officer's eyes narrowed, not at me, but at the paper. "Do you have a point of contact at the bank?" he asked. "Yes." I slid a sticky note out from behind the tab. "Ethan Davis, servicing desk, and my attorney, Clark Benson." When I said the word attorney, my mother's story visibly lost oxygen. The younger officer took notes while the older one read the audit page again, slower. "Ma'am," he said, voice shifting from suspicion to procedure, "this looks like identity theft. Your mother's report doesn't change that. But you need to make a formal statement on your side." "Good," I said, "because I'm done being quiet." I called Clark on speaker. He didn't waste a second. "Officers, this is counsel," he said. "My client is disputing fraudulent financial instruments. We're requesting this be documented as suspected forgery and unauthorized access." The older officer nodded, almost imperceptibly. "Understood." He handed me a card. "Go to the station tonight or first thing in the morning. Bring everything. Also, freeze your credit if you haven't." "I already started," I said. As they turned to leave, the younger officer paused. "One more thing," he said quietly. "Your mom mentioned a missing envelope from the house. If she's lying about that too, it means she's trying to build a second case." I watched them walk down the hallway, then looked at my binder again. They weren't just stealing my name anymore. They were trying to steal my credibility. The second the officers left, I didn't feel relieved. I felt hunted. Because if my mother was willing to file a false report, she wasn't trying to talk. She was trying to win by making me look unstable before I could prove she was criminal. Clark told me to do 3 things before sunrise: paper trail, credit freeze, police report. So I did them like my life depended on it, because suddenly it did. At 7:15 a.m., I walked into the precinct with my binder hugged to my chest like a shield. Fluorescent lights, old coffee smell, the kind of waiting room where people avoid eye contact because everyone's story is heavy. A desk sergeant called my name. I sat down, and the words came out strangely calm. "I need to file identity theft and forgery," I said. "My family used my credentials to refinance a home and open a home equity account in my name." He raised an eyebrow. Then I slid the audit trail across the counter. His expression changed. Not sympathy, attention. He asked the questions that mattered. Dates, amounts, where I lived, when I discovered it. I answered with timestamps. I watched him write "suspected unauthorized access" in his notes, and it felt like breathing after being underwater. Then he said, "Your mother filed a complaint against you last night." "I know," I replied. "That's retaliation." He nodded slowly. "It happens." He gave me a case number and told me to request the bank's authentication logs formally. "If the IP location points to the same address," he said, "this gets very serious." As I left, my phone buzzed. Dad. I almost ignored it. Almost. Oh, but something in me still wanted him to choose me once. "Dad," I said. His voice sounded smaller than I remembered. "Your mother is spiraling," he whispered. "She's telling people you're having a breakdown. She called Aunt Denise. She called the pastor." I gripped my steering wheel. "Did you tell her to stop?" Silence, then barely audible. I tried. I didn't believe him. Not fully, but I heard fear in his voice, real fear, not guilt-based fear. "What else?" I asked. He swallowed. "She said if you don't reverse this, if you don't make the bank drop it, she'll file for an emergency order. She thinks she can prove you're not fit, that you're unstable." My stomach turned. An emergency order, a paper cage, a way to discredit every report I made. I stared straight ahead and felt something click into place. The refinance wasn't the only trap. The real trap was making sure no one believed me when I screamed. I ended the call, opened Clark's email, and forwarded Dad's voicemail summary with one line, "They're escalating. So am I. Not to me, to everyone else." Clark called while I was still sitting in my car outside the precinct, case number folded in my wallet like a fragile shield. "Your father warned you," he said. "If she's talking about an emergency order, this stops being a family fight. It becomes a credibility war." A credibility war. That was her talent, turning my calm into cold, my boundaries into instability. She'd been practicing that narrative my whole life. Clark's instructions were blunt. From this moment on, you don't argue, you document. Every interaction is written. You don't meet them alone, and you don't let them isolate you. He drafted a formal notice for my parents. Cease contact except through counsel. Preserve all devices and communications related to the refinance and equity account, and stop making defamatory claims. It wasn't dramatic. It was surgical. Then he forwarded me a second email. Ethan from the bank had complied with Clark's request for deeper logs, login timestamps, device fingerprint, sign-in location. I stared at the map pin and felt my pulse slow, not speed up, because it wasn't near their neighborhood. It was their address. Clark told me to print it and make copies. "If they try to paint you as unreliable," he said, "we counter with objective data." So I built my own wall of truth. I called my job's HR manager and told her I might receive harassment or a welfare check attempt. I didn't overshare. I just said, "There's a legal dispute and a false report has already been filed. If anyone calls claiming I'm unsafe, please contact me directly before taking action." I texted Nia. If I go quiet, it's not because I'm okay with this. It's because I'm documenting. She replied instantly, proud of you. Don't let them gaslight the room. That night, I set up a cheap door camera. I placed my binder in my work bag. I charged my phone and left it face up for once, like I wasn't afraid of what it could bring me anymore. At 8:43 p.m., a new email popped onto my screen. From Evelyn Brooks, my mother. Subject, final notice. The message was one line long. If you don't fix this by tomorrow, we'll be forced to take steps for your own safety. My stomach tightened, but not with fear, with recognition, because that wasn't a plea. It was a threat. And 2 hours later, just as I was about to sleep, there was a knock at my door. Soft, professional. When I opened it, a man in a plain jacket held out a sealed packet. "Ms. Brooks?" he asked. "Yes." "You've been served." I looked down at the first page and felt the room tilt. Petition for emergency guardianship. Emergency guardianship sat on the first page in bold type, like my mother had finally found a way to turn love into handcuffs. Nia's words flashed through my mind. They only love the version of you that pays the bills. And suddenly, this didn't feel like desperation. It felt like strategy. I closed the door, locked it, then read the petition standing up, because sitting felt like surrender. If they claimed I was financially unstable, emotionally volatile, and at risk of harming myself through reckless decisions. Under evidence, they listed screenshots of my comment on Lila's anniversary post, a copy of the bank dispute email I'd sent Ethan, and a line that made my blood run cold. Requested relief, temporary control of Maya Brooks' finances, and access to all accounts to prevent further damage. So that was the play. If my mother could get a judge to sign a temporary order, she wouldn't just silence me. She'd get the keys to my money. She could restart the house payments, move funds, stall the fraud review, and tell everyone she was protecting me while stripping me of the only thing I had left, credibility. My phone buzzed with a text from Lila. "We didn't want it to come to this. Just cooperate, and it'll go away." I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Then I called Clark. He picked up on the second ring. "Tell me you haven't responded to them." "I haven't," I said. "They served me. Emergency guardianship. They're asking for control of my accounts." Clark went quiet for one beat. Then his voice sharpened. "Good. That means we know the motive. Email me every page right now, and listen, you do not go to that hearing alone." "Hearing?" I asked. "Check the last page." I flipped to the back, and my stomach dropped. "Court date, tomorrow, 9 a.m. "Tonight, we build a counterfile," Clark said. "Police report, bank audit logs, employment verification, witnesses who can testify you're functioning, and this is retaliation." I opened my binder and slid the police case number into the front sleeve like it belonged there all along. I printed the bank map pin that matched my parents' address. I added my mother's "for your own safety" email, because it wasn't concern. It was premeditation. At midnight, Nia texted, "Need me tomorrow?" I typed back, "Yes. Bring your calm voice." Then I set the petition on my kitchen table and looked at the signature at the bottom. Evelyn Brooks. My mother wasn't trying to save me. She was trying to own me. And in the morning, she planned to do it in public. Courtroom 3B was all hardwood and harder silence. Clark sat beside me, calm enough to borrow. Nia took the bench behind us, her presence a quiet promise. "You're not alone." Across the aisle, Mom arrived dressed like concern, soft cardigan, pearls, hands clasped tight as prayer. Lila hovered at her shoulder, phone face down, but ready. When the judge entered, Mom's voice turned syrupy. "Your Honor, my daughter is spiraling. She's making reckless financial decisions. We just want to protect her." The judge, a silver-haired woman with tired eyes, looked over the petition, then at me. "Ms. Brooks, do you understand what emergency guardianship means?" "Yes," I said. My throat was dry. "It means she'd control my money." Mom flinched like I'd insulted her. "Only temporarily," she insisted, "until she stabilizes." Clark stood. "Your Honor, this petition is retaliation. Ms. Brooks discovered fraudulent loans made using her identity. When she reported it, her mother filed a false complaint and then pursued guardianship to seize control of Ms. Brooks's accounts." He placed a small stack of papers on the clerk's table. "My police case number, the bank's audit trail, and a copy of my mother's email. For your own safety." The judge lifted the audit page. "This sign-in location," she said, tapping the map pin, "matches your address, Mrs. Brooks." Mom's smile froze. "Technology isn't perfect." "Are you under oath?" the judge asked. "Yes," Mom said, too quick. "Then answer plainly." The judge's eyes didn't blink. "Did you or anyone in your home use Ms. Brooks' credentials to authorize a refinance?" Lila's face drained of color. Mom swallowed. I don't know." Clark's voice stayed steady. "Your Honor, we're requesting immediate denial and a referral for investigation. This is an attempt to silence the victim by labeling her unstable." The judge set the papers down like they were contaminated. "Emergency guardianship is denied," she said, "and I'm documenting this petition as potentially retaliatory. Mrs. Brooks, you will not contact your daughter except through counsel. Ms. Brooks, same." Mom's eyes flashed, anger breaking through the mask. "You're ruining your family," she snapped. The judge's gavel cracked once. "We're done." In the hallway, Lila stepped close, voice shaking with fury. "You just started a war." I looked at her and felt strangely calm. "No," I said. "You started it when you used my name." My phone buzzed as we walked out. An email from Ethan. "Fraud review confirmed. The loan will be accelerated. Foreclosure proceedings begin today." 3 months after that brunch, I watched the Carter house stop feeling like a family home and start looking like a foreclosure listing. I drove past it on a gray December morning because I had to file one last packet at the county office. The street was the same. Bare trees, its frozen lawns, but the place looked smaller, like it had been deflated. The "for sale" sign my mom once bragged about had a new red sticker slapped across it. Bank owned. The porch light was off. The windows were dark. Even the wreath on the door had collapsed, half hanging like it was tired of pretending. I didn't park. I didn't walk up the steps. I just slowed down long enough to see what my money had been holding together and what happened the second I stopped. The foreclosure didn't crawl. It sprinted. Once the bank flagged the account and the fraud review opened, the missed payments became a countdown. Weeks, not months. Before Christmas, the bank had already taken the house back. Movers hauled the furniture into storage. The garden my mother treated like a religion turned to brittle stems. The whole place went quiet. No music drifting from the kitchen, no careful footsteps, no arguments spilling onto the porch. Lila left first. I heard it from a mutual friend. She'd been crashing on someone's pull-out couch, the same sister who used to post family-first selfies like they were proof of virtue. Her accounts went private, then silent. The bank's legal department called her for a deposition, and she ignored it, right up until ignoring it wasn't an option. A month later, my attorney forwarded me a notice, a civil complaint from the district attorney's office, tied to falsified documents from that refinance. I read it twice, waiting for guilt to rise. It didn't. My mother called after the house was gone. Her voice sounded thin, brittle, like paper that's been folded too many times. "You didn't have to destroy us," she whispered. "You could have helped." She didn't say, "I'm sorry." She didn't say, "We lied." She just wanted the safety net back. Dad never called. Maybe silence was still his favorite way to survive. The first week of February, I moved into a small apartment in Rochester. Second-hand couch, mismatched plates, big windows facing a narrow parkway. Kids walked home from school every afternoon, boots crunching snow, laughing like the world wasn't complicated. And for the first time in years, my life was mine. Then my phone buzzed with an unknown number and a voicemail that started with, "Ms. Carter, this is Investigator Reyes. We need to ask you a few questions about your sister." The voicemail from Investigator Reyes sat on my screen. "Ms. Carter," his voice said, calm but urgent, "I need to ask you a few questions about your sister. Call me back tonight." "Don't use email," I called. "Are you alone?" he asked. "My apartment. Door locked." "Good. You hired me to verify the refinance signature. It didn't come from you." My throat tightened. "Then who?" "The bank's confirmation link was opened through your parents' old joint email, inside the approval window," Reyes said. "It was accessed from a phone on your family plan. Location, near your parents' house." "That could be anyone," I said, even though my mind had already chosen a name. "I kept digging," he replied. "Same timestamp. Your sister's card was used a few blocks away. I pulled security footage. Ava was there, phone in hand, staring at the screen like she was waiting for something to load. The minute she walked out, the bank logged, "Authorization complete." My stomach rolled. So she forged it. "Yes. And the notary stamp on your refinance packet," he added. "It belongs to a notary who lost her commission last year. The only recent appointment tied to that stamp was scheduled by Ava." I gripped the counter. "That's fraud." "It is," Reyes said, "and it explains the guardianship push. If she paints you as unstable, your protest becomes proof you're the problem, while she keeps controlling the money." A cold calm slid over me, the same calm I'd felt in court when Mom tried to speak for me. "What do I do?" "File a police report tonight," Reyes said. "Freeze your credit, notify the bank's fraud unit in writing, and tell your attorney to subpoena IP logs and the notary appointment records." I stared at the printed statements on my table. Dates, charges, accounts I didn't recognize. Each one a betrayal in black ink. "She's escalating," Reyes continued. "Today she tried to open a new credit line in your name. It got flagged, but she'll keep trying. And when money doesn't work, she'll switch to pressure." Pressure. That was Mom's specialty. Reyes paused. "Ms. Carter, do you want to win or do you want to keep the peace?" My mouth opened, but my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Mom. Under her name, a message preview flashed. "Your father signed something. Come now." My mom's voice wasn't panicked. It was sharp, like she was ringing a bell and expecting me to run. After everything, being excluded, paying their mortgage, finding the forged loans, I knew one thing for sure. If she wanted me in that house, it wasn't for closure, it was for control. I didn't go alone. I texted Clark. They're pulling something new. I'm going to their house. Stay available. Then I forwarded the message to Na with one line. If I stop replying, call me. I drove with my phone recording screen face down in the cup holder. Snow dusted the curbs. My hand stayed steady on the wheel, but my stomach felt like it had swallowed ice. The porch light was on when I arrived, bright, almost theatrical. Mom opened the door before I knocked. She looked pleased, not relieved, not worried. Pleased. You finally decided to act like family, she said. Inside, Dad sat at the kitchen table, shoulders hunched. A single page lay in front of him, pen still uncapped. His eyes were red, like he hadn't slept. What did you sign? I asked. Mom slid the paper toward me with 2 fingers, like she was doing me a favor. Affidavit of authorization. A sworn statement claiming I had requested the refinance and approved the home equity account, signed by my father as a witness. My throat went tight. Dad, why would you do this? He didn't answer. He just stared at the wood grain like it might swallow him. Mom leaned in. This fixes everything. The bank stops digging. The police stop calling, and you stop humiliating us. There it was. The real goal, not truth. Silence. You think this protects you? I said, voice low. It makes you look guiltier. A shadow moved in the hallway. Ava, hair pulled back, face pale, jaw clenched. I told you she'd freak out, Ava snapped. She always does. I turned to her slowly. I know you were the one who did it. Her eyes widened, then hardened. Prove it. I pulled out my phone and opened the email Reyes had sent. Security footage, time-stamped. 'Twas you holding the phone when the bank logged authorization complete, notary stamp tied to your appointment. Mom's smile collapsed. Dad's head lifted just slightly, like he'd been waiting for someone else to speak the truth first. I didn't want to sign, he whispered. She said, if I didn't, she'd tell the judge you were dangerous. She said she'd take everything from you. Mom's face twisted. Robert, a loud knock hit the front door. 3 sharp knocks. Official. I froze. Mom froze. Ava stepped back like she'd been burned. Dad stared toward the hallway and whispered, almost to himself, they're here. The 3 knocks landed like a gavel. Mom's face went blank. Then she forced a smile so fast it looked painful. Robert, she hissed, don't say a word. Dad didn't move. His hand stayed flat on the table, like he'd finally decided to stop pretending his silence was harmless. I walked to the door first. 2 officers stood on the porch, and behind them was a man in plain clothes holding a folder. He flashed a badge. Ms. Carter? He asked. Yes. I'm Investigator Reyes. We have a warrant to seize devices and records connected to the refinance authorization and the home equity account. Mom pushed past me, blocking the doorway with her body like she could physically rewrite reality. This is ridiculous, she said, voice sweet and offended. My daughter is confused. She's been emotional. We're trying to protect her. Reyes didn't react. He simply looked at the paper in his hand. Ma'am, step aside. Mom's eyes flicked to me, warning, command, motherly poison. Tell them, she said through clenched teeth. Tell them you're overreacting. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Behind her, Ava shifted in the hallway. Her phone was already in her hand. Reyes's gaze snapped to it. "Ma'am," he said, pointing to Ava, "place the phone on the counter. Now." Ava's mouth opened, then closed. She took one step back. Dad finally stood. The chair scraped the tile, loud as a confession. "It wasn't her," he said, voice shaking. "It wasn't my older daughter. It was—" Mom spun on him. "Robert!" He flinched, but he kept going. "It was Ava. Your mother told me it was paperwork, that you'd agreed. I didn't know it was fraud until I saw the logs." Ava's face twisted. "You're throwing me under the bus?" Reyes raised a hand, calm but absolute. "Everyone stop talking. Any statements can be made at the station." Mom's voice jumped higher. "You can't do this. That's our home." Reyes didn't look at her. He nodded to the officers, and they stepped inside, methodical, like they'd done this 1,000 times. One officer photographed the affidavit on the table. The other asked, "Where are the laptops? Where are the loan documents kept?" Ava moved suddenly, too fast, toward the sink. I saw it, her thumb swiping, trying to delete something. "Hands!" an officer barked. Ava froze. Mom's eyes met mine, and for the first time there was no mask, just fear. Reyes turned to me. "Ms. Carter, you're not under investigation, but we may need your statement again. Please stay available." I nodded once. Then I stepped back into the cold air, standing on the porch while my family's perfect image finally got searched, documented, and dismantled, one device at a time. The day after the warrant, my mother called me 12 times before breakfast. I didn't answer. I watched the missed calls stack up beside my legal name, Maya Brooks Carter, like proof that she still believed access to me was something she deserved. By noon, Clark had the inventory list from the seizure: 2 laptops, 1 desktop, 3 phones, and a folder labeled Loan Maya. The casualness of that label made my skin crawl. My identity wasn't a person to them, it was a tool. That afternoon, the bank sent an acceleration notice. The language was clinical. Because the refinance was flagged as fraud, the loan could be called due immediately. Translation: the house would fall fast, and my mother wouldn't be able to talk her way out of math. Investigator Reyes asked me to come in for a recorded statement. The interview room was beige and quiet, the kind of place where lies get tired. I handed over the affidavit my dad had signed under pressure, the text, and the audit showing the authorization completed at my parents' address. Reyes didn't ask me how it felt. He asked what was true. "Did you ever consent?" "No." "Did you benefit from the refinance or the equity draw?" "No." "Did you threaten your family?" "I set a boundary," I said. "They called it a threat because they lost control." 2 days later, Ava's attorney requested a meeting, not to apologize, just to negotiate. They wanted me to reconsider cooperating in exchange for a family resolution. Clark laughed once, right into the phone. "There is no resolution without accountability," he said. "There is evidence." That same night, Dad texted me something I'd waited my whole life to hear. Too late, but real. "I'm sorry. Oh, I should have protected you. I told him everything." My mother went scorched earth online. A new post, vague and saintly. "When a child turns against family, the world applauds." Comments poured in, until someone replied with a photo of officers carrying boxes out of her house. The thread went quiet. Image is fragile when it meets facts. On Friday, a letter arrived from the district attorney. Ava was being charged, and my parents were being reviewed for related offenses. My stomach didn't flip with joy. It settled with certainty. Because consequences weren't revenge. They were gravity. And as I filed the final paperwork to remove my liability from the loans, I realized the story was no longer about whether my family loved me. It was about whether I would ever let them own me again. No shouting, no viral moment, just paperwork, a tired judge, and the slow sound of a story finally closing. Clark met me outside the courtroom with a thin envelope and a look I recognize now. Clean certainty. "It's done," he said. "Your name is officially removed from the fraudulent refinance and the equity account. Liability returns to the actual borrowers." The judge noted intentional misuse of authorization. I stared at the order until the words stopped swimming. For months, my life had been a loop. Prove I'm not crazy. Prove I didn't consent. Prove I'm not the villain in my mother's version of events. And now, in black ink, the truth was finally born, and that was the most beautiful thing about it. Outside, snow drifted across the sidewalk like the world was erasing tracks. My phone buzzed once. A new message from Dad. "I'm sorry. I should have chosen you sooner." I read it twice. Awe then set the phone down without replying. Not because I hated him, not because I wanted him to suffer, because apology without change is just a softer form of control. Ava's case moved forward the way consequences always do, quietly, steadily, with dates and signatures instead of emotion. Mom tried to call again after the ruling, but her voice had lost its old power. When someone has spent years weaponizing family, they don't know what to do when the word stops working. I moved for real. New apartment, new routine, new silence that didn't feel like punishment. Rochester wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. Morning light in the kitchen, second-hand furniture I assembled myself, a key on my ring that opened only my own door. One night, I found an old family photo in a drawer, us in front of the house before it became a legal file. Ava pressed close to Mom, Dad behind them, me on the edge, half smiling, half cropped, like an afterthought. I didn't tear it up. I didn't frame it. I slid it into an envelope and tucked it away. Some memories don't need revenge. They just need distance. The strangest part was this. I expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt light. Because the win wasn't the foreclosure or the warrant or even the judge's order. The win was the moment I stopped buying my place at their table. Peace cost me everything I used to call love, and it paid me back in sleep, and just like that, our story comes to a close. Now, my wonderful friends, are you still here with me? If you've stayed until this moment, then something in this journey touched your heart in a real way. What Maya learned is something many of us learn the hard way. Love isn't proven by how much you sacrifice, and family isn't a license to use you. Real care respects boundaries. Real love doesn't demand your silence, your money, or your identity. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop paying the price of being accepted and start protecting your peace. The Stoics had a quiet kind of healing for moments like this. Epictetus reminds us that we can't control what others do, only how we respond. Marcus Aurelius wrote that our life becomes what we choose to focus on. So when you focus on truth, courage, and self-respect, you rebuild yourself from the inside out. And Seneca warned that no one is free who is a slave to fear, especially the fear of disappointing people who don't value you. If this story spoke to you, please like, share, and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, what boundary are you choosing to protect next?